academia, scholasticism, education. What is education? Peterson Academy. Potentially contrasting that with my understanding of Personalist knowing and how we prioritize those things.
If everybody goes their own enlightened way, let's say, there's no social cohesion. There's no unity of purpose. There's nothing but fragmentation. And part of the danger of the hippie movement in the 1960s was a counter-social fragmentation.
Right.
Now, so you can imagine, things get so constrained that everybody's exactly the same, and that's a complete totalitarian catastrophe. But you can imagine the opposite catastrophe, which is that, well, everyone's letting it all hang out and doing their own thing, and that's equally dangerous.
Right.
And so there's some balance in the middle. Well, that's that balance between chaos and order that we were referring to earlier. Complex social order can be maintained by something like mindless obedience.
Right.
That's suboptimal. What you'd really want is enlightened responsibility.
Right.
Now,
right. That's a great way to put it.
Right. That's a very hard thing to pull off, though, because it means that you have to leap out of the box of social constraint, and you have to take the responsibility onto yourself.
When he said where everyone's the same thing, and it's overly authoritarian and totalitarian, it's a monolith, it's a cultural monolith, there is no multiplicity. That's essentially identical replicationism, which is what you get from the machine, it's what you get from a factory, it's what you get from systematic replication. It's Henry Ford. You get the same thing over and over and over, and you try to diminish. The whole point of that systematic stuff is you try to diminish difference, which is completely different from a actual body. Any actual body, anything that truly exists, true being, is a unity of multiplicities. There is much difference within it. If there wasn't a lot of difference, it wouldn't be a body and it wouldn't work. The hand is not the eye, is not the foot. Humanity is not the Borg. And so this is the difference between enlightened responsibility versus mindless obedience. So like mindless obedience, you could call it like acquiescence. It's just doing the things as a child. Not with a child mind, not like becoming a child again. You have to not be a little children to become like a little children. So you have to be wise as serpents, but innocent as doves. You have to have surpassed your childishness and then strive for a childlikeness. That's beginner's mind, falling off the peak of Mount Stupid, Dunning-Kruger. It's all of that stuff. And so you need an enlightened responsibility, and responsibility is key. All of these people that come up to Peterson, the one recurrent thing that everybody says that has been when people are just like, you've been so affecting to me in my life and you've helped me. He says the common thread is taking responsibility. So you need an enlightened responsibility, not just doing things like a mindless drone because mom and dad said so, or some authority said so, or whatever. And there is a degree of fake it till you make it. You learn through the doing, but the goal is the enlightened submission. Not my will, but your will. Voluntarily giving up your will to get to something higher, to God's will. Sacrifice. That's a repeated thing throughout all this thing.
Because the classic therapist-produced view of mental health is that mental health is sort of inside you. It's in your psyche, it's in your mind. But it's not. Like, your mental health is the harmony of your existence in relationship to the future and other people. Right? And that sense of well-being
So that's it. It's the harmony of your future self and your past self, all those different things, all the selves and other people. That's mental health. That's integration. It's the White Stone name. It's emanation and emergence, the future and the past, all of it as one in the same unity. It's not just in your head. It's not just nominalism. It's not just in the idea space. It's everything, where what's good for you is good for your family, is good for your kids, is good for your neighbors, your community, your state, your city, your world. It's good for everything. It scales. But if you try to get those things, if you try to get the gifts that God will give you without pursuing God, you'll end up in debauchery and decay and worshiping the golden calf. It won't work. Your mind is not set on the highest things. Set your mind on things above and all things will be given to you as well, like that thing. And there's something, and Rogan said the thing that he's most successful at, he didn't see in an articulable, clear, propositional kind of way. Rogan could not have told you this story in advance. It was a synchronization of all these different things that he could never name and articulate. It was the muse. It was doing the work. He had discussions with people that he wanted to talk about, and this thing slowly emerged, and podcasting has become what it is. And there's incredible money and value, and people try to mimic it and transactionally take advantage of it to get the minor gods instead of pursuing the thing that they should be pursuing, which is this mystical thing that you can't name that's out there. That's a lot of what TLC is. Like I've said, I don't know that the medium where people meet and find mates and have children, and it's primarily about persons via the randos and not primarily about ideas, not about minor gods and things underneath, but about the person, which is the nexus and the locus of all meaning and all value and all consciousness and all perception, because that's the double slit experiment, and consciousness and attention, an online space where people are truly known and seen, where you know as you are known, 1 Corinthians 8, hopefully in the best possible ways. I think that's here. This is the problem with scholasticism, is you think you can educate people just through the ritual of sitting in an academic classroom and listening to people lecture about ideas. How does education happen? Is it primarily through ideas, or is it through personal knowing, which is the integration of all the P's? Participatory knowing, propositional knowing, perspectival knowing, and procedural knowing. The unity of those 4 P's is personal knowing, which puts the person at the center of knowledge, and knowing persons, not just that academically, you could take my personal knowing and understand it academically and not understand it personally because you don't know me. That's the difference. So you have to put the person at the center of knowledge, or else I don't think you're ever going to know as you are known. All right, I don't need to keep riffing on that. I'm going to throw out the invite. I don't know that I'm going to be able to go to your party Sunday. Neil, you can come in here, my good friend. It's good to see you. Oh, we get some Dume.
Sanity, or just who we are, is a outsourced and crowdsourced phenomena. Mental stability or mental health is not it's not housed here. It's housed
in many ways.
Most people's mental health or wellness is based on 4 factors. It's based on vocation, so that's your job or creative enterprise. It's basically how you define yourself in work. It's marriage, it's community, and it's religion. Those 4 things. So vocation, marriage, community, and religion. TLC, and this man right here, but also this man right here and that man right there. I'm grateful to all of you for offshoring my sanity, and I'm a more sane man as a result. So thank you.
I just wanted to pop in to say I love all of you. You're my favorite people, and gotta pack and leave for a birthday trip with my wife. I'll catch up.
Bye. Steel Manning McMoe's compliment. I would like someone to just give a brief outline of maternal family systems, because I'm not sure I completely understand it. Back to my academic scholastic point.
One question I have about IFS is, who are you talking to when you're talking to the parts of you? Are you talking to the parts of you now, or are you talking to the parts of you that could be or should be that you're working towards into the future? Because I am not the same person that I was 6 years ago. So Jung would say your psyche, meaning the things that are outside of my free will to have interest in, to care about, the loves that are within me, you could say, are different as a result of that 6-year transformation. So if I engaged in IFS 6 years ago, I suspect the things that I would be told would not be in my best interest.
Maybe I should first just briefly outline for Luke what the
That'd be great.
So then we can continue, because I'd like to respond to what Neil said. But IFS, essentially, I don't know what the name of the guy is, but it started by a family therapist. So he would do therapy with families. And then he was like, well, maybe actually I can apply this to individuals too. So he would have the individual parts. He would say that, there's these individual parts of every human personality that are in some sort of dialogue with each other. And if there's seemingly some kind of trauma, something that doesn't seem to work, addiction issues, stuff like that, which is also obviously why Mark Lewis is also interested in it. That might actually be one part feeling neglected by some of the other parts. So we have the parts in dialogue with each other, and the scary, the weird thing is for the scientists that the people who engage in the therapy, they don't just experience talking to the parts, they experience the parts talking back to them. And that's obviously why then people from religious communities are like, well, are these all just good parts? Because that's everyone in the scientific community seems to be very enthusiastic. Like, okay, what could this be like? And we need to be compassionate. And it seems that, for instance, PVK was generally speaking, he was on board with that. But at the same time, like, yeah, but can some of these parts also, maybe deceive you? And that's kind of what Neil was starting about. So I'll respond to that. It's like if we relate it to Jung, right? Like, and that notion of the self, that there seems to be this, and that part of the self is incorporating the shadow, then I think it makes sense to, like that there are parts of yourself that can be trusted and at the same time do need to be integrated. So like, I don't want to be like this naive understanding of like, oh yeah, I mean, like everything is just good, so I can just talk to anything. But at the same time, like, they are parts of me in that weird sense that need to be integrated in some kind of way, even if that means acknowledging the very dark aspects of myself. And that's not to say like they should be worshipped or something like that. Like that's obviously a very different point, but just to be integrated. That's how I would look at that.
I'm glad that I let you do it. I think that was a good summary.
I think it's possible that our potential aversion to IFS is that it can be a little bit of this two-story universe, the divided world stuff of materialism, spirituality, because everything is spiritual. There are spiritual components to all things. And it's maybe if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, in a sense, everything's talking to you. It's just not talking to you in... It's not necessarily talking to you in articulable phrases and words, but
I would say that there is still a syntax though, and like there's a grammar, and I think that this syntax and grammar is like the laws of symbolism or something like that. It's like the way that like things tend to happen in a certain way, and so like sometimes you'll be like, oh, that person's reminding me of a particular biblical character, right? Because the Bible has condensed these patterns such that like they're like archetypal patterns in a way where you can see like if something is going to unfold in a certain way, you can like recognize it maybe by making reference to biblical stories or something. So like there is a language, like that God is communicating with you with. However, it's not going to sound like a human speaking. It's going to be like you able to notice the symbolic patterns or something like that,
Yeah, Psalm 19, baby. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night sheweth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their works to the end of the world. And them that in them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it. And there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. I could go on, but anyway.
I think that's just a metaphor, right?
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just thinking about like regular Jonathan Peugeot symbolism. Not that Jonathan Peugeot isn't a closet astrologer, but I think, that's. I'm glad you made that connection, because I really think that that's worth talking about.
I don't think he's closeted. I just don't think he even knows he's gay yet.
Well, I think of Ian McGilchrist, where he's saying schizophrenia is overactivity of the left brain, and I think finding meaning is waking up the right brain.
I think you might be having them flipped. I'm not
That's
sure.
what I was thinking, because Cal
No, it's counterintuitive. Look it up. Ian McGilchrist said schizophrenia is overactivity of the left brain.
Gotcha.
And that's the problem with our culture right now. Is they're too left-brained, and they're finding meaning everywhere. They're trying to find meaning everywhere.
The way that I've always seen it is autism is more of a hyper left-brained myopia, where you get it's hyper focus on specific details that you can't see outside of, because meaning is found in, like, you could almost think of it with vision and focal and periphery. Without the periphery, the focus loses its context and its medium, and it makes no sense. It's just isolated. And that can be a little bit of what autism is. Whereas the schizotypal is just like all you see is connections everywhere, and you can lose. You're just flipping so quickly in all these different things. You see meaning everywhere that it's too fast.
Yeah, I found somebody who who condensed and paraphrased Ian McGilchrist's argument, so I'll share that. McGilchrist ties together several aspects of schizophrenia, autism, and right hemisphere dysfunction or damage in chapter 9 of his book, pointing like he did in his first big book to the idea that these ideas are on the rise because of an imbalance of hemispheres, with most of us living in the left hemisphere dominant culture. The way in which he describes the similarities of these diseases is primarily done by talking about the left hemisphere's fixation on representation. He quoted numerous schizoid patients from throughout the last 150 years talking about how reality had lost its vital meaning, that the map of consciousness had become the terrain itself, that there is a pane of glass between me and mankind. McGilchrist talks about hyperconsciousness, quoting people saying it can be regarded as a loss of sparkle, a freezing and repetition of present existence, and a reflection of the intellectual side of man's nature rather than the free play of individual life forces. He also relates this form of paying attention to the myth of the machine, again quoting several patients relating reality to a lifeless machine that they can't escape from. With this machine thread, he then pushed into the virtual and relates the left hemisphere world to the ever-increasing virtual world. Quote, the left hemisphere's world is now an increasingly virtual world. It no longer even pretends to yield a faithful portrayal of reality. For that, it depends on the right hemisphere. It has, it thinks, more important, certainly other things to do. It is there to unpack the implicit in what it is given about the outside world, making it explicit, and deal with it according to the rules. It is there to aid strategy. Unfortunately, by being purely strategic in intent, the left hemisphere makes strategic mistakes since it remains largely ignorant of the reality on which it relies, as a sophisticated computer world, and very soon, no doubt, will. So he's saying it's confusing as you go into left brain, you're confusing map for territory. You're no longer bounded reality, and you are trying to assimilate everything and put it into and systematize it and make it explicit. And that is the very act of schizophrenia, because if you have a more right brain approach to symbolism, not everything's explicit. You can't articulate everything, and you can't systematize it. The truth is not systematizable. The truth can't be captured on a spreadsheet. And the schizophrenic move is to try to capture reality in a spreadsheet and then forecast it. And so they're trying to find meaning in everything and looking at they're hyper focused on pattern. They're hyper focused on trying to predict what's going to happen tomorrow using their spreadsheet model. Okay.
That makes sense to me. That model works for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
It describes a lot of what I wasted decades of my life doing.
Same. That's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
I make reports.
Exactly.
I use Excel for a living. That's what I do.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's
I
interesting.
complain about the machine, so I got to be careful.
It's interesting because it suggests that, like, maybe, a resolution to schizophrenia would be some sort of interpretive framework. My mind went to astrology. It's like maybe if you don't have an intentional relationship with this right brain or whatever, then it presents as kind of this left brainism, schizophrenia type of thing. If you have this more open flowing attitude and relationship with it, the resolution to this kind of modern situation is like a reintroduction of a healthy right brain or something.
It's like the left brain trying to come to terms with what the right brain is doing.
Yeah.
But in an inappropriate way.
Yeah.
Jumping
in
to
an
conclusions,
abstract
for
way.
example.
It's abstracting everything, right? So like when you're trying to count something and then you do a little multiplication or division, all of a sudden you have this decimal, and if you round it, like even the decimal, like you've separated from reality, right? Like any mathematical model, there's a distance between that model and reality. And schizophrenia is the act of moving all the way into the model and thinking that you know reality. You think you know reality because your model says something,
Like
and it's completely divorced.
Meaning's always over here in the right brain. And to, Grogan's point, left brain is the new total depravity. It's not. It's all fine as long as it's an icon, as long as it's relational, as long as it's pointing to something. The left brain is fine. Maps are fine.
Distracted by the
and that's kind of
The propositions of faith are icons.
And that's kind of what I was saying with what Jeremy's quote, where it's like the solution to that crazy systematization is once we actually add back in the right brain, like in a healthy way, to recognize the things we're seeing as iconic, then it no longer becomes this like brutal systematization, like degeneration. It's almost like schizophrenia, as we're using it, is a result of like the materialistic outlook, where once we acknowledge the reality of the spiritual, it no longer presents to us as this, this modern schizophrenia, let's say, if we want to say that.
It's like a mythos encapsulates sort of how facts can't really alone provide all the meaning that you need to operate in the world.
I wanted to jump back a little bit to the personal knowing stuff and like the IFS thing, maybe a little bit. I'm going to offer a diffuse mosaic vision here, all right? This is not, I do not have a fully fleshed out idea. So this idea of beings are relational, such that who I am is in a sense the through line of all the people I have met. Those relations that I have, they cohere and create my identity or something. And ultimately, like my relationship with God, which is through all those other ones. So then we have this idea of the consciousness congruous. I worry about like subjectivism, where it's like you don't actually exist, you're just like our relationship or something. But we have to remember that there's like way more or something, more relations. And somehow I think that this connects to the idea of personal knowing, diffuse mosaic vision here. And then the last thing that I'm adding on is that you were talking about how the 4 layers, personal knowing is kind of the through line that connects them all. And that made me think of how in older times they were talking about the ether, which is, they had the 4 elements, and then the 5th element was ether, and it was considered as like a unifying and binding holistic sort of element that was all pervasive and formative in all things.
Now the scientists call that ether dark matter, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, basically, as far as I understand. Yeah. And something about etheric vision, being able to perceive the relations that constitute you as an individual or something. And to do that requires me personally knowing you or something like that. So I haven't figured it all out, but hopefully you found that kind of get some sense that I'm maybe...
because that's connected to Grog's question about what about facts about God. And I said it's the exact same thing. You have to know him.
Yeah.
You can know all the facts about me. You could repeat me forever, but you won't understand, you won't know it, you won't have proper knowledge. 1 Corinthians 8, which is my definition, my understanding of proper knowledge is knowing as you are known.
No, Luke, it's obvious. So all you need to do is you have to have a double-blind, sufficiently large study within the system that an omniscient being created.
We got it.
This reminds me, my dad wanted to get a tattoo. He never did, but he wanted to get a tattoo of a barcode on his head and have the barcode be his social security number, because he was like, we've been abstracted to that. We've been abstracted to our social security number by the government, right? That's how they see us. They don't see us as a person. They see us as a...
I really like the I really like the livestock analogy. That really resonates. I think,
Yeah.
Do you think we need a Christian state, Luke? Do you think that's the answer?
No,
sir.
Yeah.
Antithetical to...
I think, like, as you watch spirits and principalities enter people, like, we have no framework to judge a system that's like these principalities and powers and exercise them, because we're like, well, if people decide not to do these things, like whatever, if they want to live like lavish lifestyles and not have kids, like that's their decision. But like clearly that's an evil spirit. You don't need fully Christ consciousness to at least protect yourself from principalities and powers.
Choose the right IFS members.
Yeah. IFS is very similar to the Consciousness Congress that Paul talks about, I think, in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, and we can actually maybe think of this as like the people that we encounter or something, right? Such that maybe, you know, like sometimes we can pick up habits from people, right? So it's maybe like that person becomes part of my internal family system, and then maybe that person possesses me. You're being like Timmy, that's not you, that's Timmy, or something, you know? And I think what it has to do with is aligning our Consciousness Congress such that it's unified by our own perception or something that is like connected to God. Or I mean, I guess your perception is, that's when we're really most connected to God, is when we're seeing things most personally or something, like most through our own lens. However, it's not that that's just like a subjective, you know, this is my reading of this, so that is reality. It's more like that in those instances where we're really seeing ourselves, that's when we something like can cohere all the other relations and find the through line or something. It's like seeing from a God's eye view or something like that.
Yeah, it's like, so you have this Consciousness Congress or this, all these IFS or all these demons or all these principalities or whatever's going on in your brain, advertisements and microplastics. But what you need to do is you need to lead, because you're saying, you said the word align the Consciousness Congress, and I thought about like, so the Speaker of the House or like the whip who like gets everybody in alignment, that's a leader. And the thing is, if leading for your passions, so like your worldly pleasure, or you're just you want to be irresponsible, so you align all your Consciousness Congress to help you, like, you know, just jack off the porn for like 12 hours. That's not real leadership. That's like abdicating actual leadership.
Yeah.
Because there is a truth.
Yeah, and this is
a
the
higher authority. And so like a real leader, especially a leader who could, let's say, unite Republicans and Democrats, or like, you know, the marketers versus the engineers, person who can align those people is appealing to a higher authority.
Christian worldview, that they had something to do with a higher order, which implies a legitimacy. So,
and they're like the instrument and the channel for like, this is the truth. This is actually what would be the right thing, or at least a manifestation of the right thing. Believe me, follow me, let's go in this direction. And maybe that's what's missing from psychotherapy is
Christ.
A lack of
Christ.
belief
It's
in there
Christ.
is
You know,
right.
the person who coheres the hierarchy.
Yeah, they don't want to do that. They're like, no, you choose your own adventure.
Like you need the leading authority. You need to like be submitted to the highest principality and power, which is God.
Attention is a muscle, right? And your ability to focus your attention on what you choose is a skill that's developed over time, right? And that's what prayer is. Prayer is to teach you how to focus. And so as you're standing in liturgy, you're learning how to focus on what's being said, and as you do that, your left brain is calming down, and all of a sudden you start being able to take in what's going on there, you know. And as you start taking it in, you start seeing the world differently. And you start, the evidence that the T-Grogs in the world are looking for come after the participation. It's the beauty first, participation first approach, rather than the propositional figure it all out first and then do what I like, theorize and hypothesize, and then, you know, and then maybe do an experiment and it doesn't prove my hypothesis. It's like this is you learn to swim by hopping in the water, right? You learn to swim by standing in the water, and then by, you know, and you have someone who knows how to swim, who is a guide who's showing you how to swim. And it's not that the person teaching you how to swim is your boss and that you have to listen to them. You can do whatever you want if you're trying to swim, but you're probably going to end up doggy paddling and you're going to wear yourself out in 10 feet. So there's somebody who knows how to swim. He's going to teach you how to swim. That's what church is, right? Church is learning how to swim, and the priest is the person who knows how to swim. If you hold the compass on the map and walk the whole time, you're going to run into a tree or walk off a cliff or whatever, right? Like, it's
You're gonna be off track and have no idea that you are.